Welcome to the World Touring Car Championship 2016. It's round 5 and we are at the most exciting circuit of the year, the Nordschleife at Nürburgring. We had FP0 earlier on this morning and we're just about to go into FP1. Now we've got 172 blind bends, 25 kilometres. It's a very, very dangerous track known as the Green Hell. But it was a lovely track for Citroën last year, who won both races. Ivan and Pachito won race 1 and race 2. This year, Pachito's made a very nice start to the year, to the weekend, to the day. What are you learning out there?
Yes, for sure. Ivan did the best time and Pachito's second time. Okay, it was the first run of the drivers on this very special and long track. I think they need to do some runs here to really be confident. But it seems that the car is working quite well, that Ivan is better than last year in the first practice. It's really good for the rest of the weekend. And
have you guys spent much time here since the race last year?
No, we did not go back. Ivan a little bit. He came here to test with his own car, but Pachito not. He only did a small test with his own simulator at home.
Great stuff. Thank you very much, Yves. Well, let's look ahead to FP1.
Thanks to Yves Maton, and that was Alex Legui down in the pit road at the Nürburgring. Martin Haven and Richard Coleman sitting above the pit entrance. Jose Maria Lopez fastest in the first unofficially timed session. But this is where they start to bed themselves in a little bit, because not only have they got to try and find some speed in the drivers, they've also, Richard, got to try and make sure that the car works for this very different kind of a racetrack. This is more a rally stage than a racetrack compared to what they're used to racing on.
Yeah, absolutely. The setup that you'll see here is very, very different from the rest of the championship season, and gives all the teams a headache because when they design their cars, they have to design them for ultimate performance. There's no point designing a car that's going to do very well here and then struggle at all the other 11 rounds. So it's very, very challenging for the teams to get their cars to work as best as they can around this very demanding circuit.
And we are using not just the full Grand Prix circuit of the Nürburgring, as seen in Formula One for many years, but we're using the old Grand Prix circuit, the Nordschleife, which was, well, the whole of the Nürburgring facility opened in 1927. A long, demanding, twisting country road, switchback. Back in 1960s, Jackie Stewart was the man who gave it the nickname the Green Hell, and it's something that it's revelled in ever since. It is perhaps the ultimate demanding racetrack. There may be others that have faster corners, there may be others that have more dangerous corners, but none have got the number, and at least in car racing, the number of fast and dangerous corners and the history that goes with it. The only other racetrack that you could really think of that is still being used is the TT course on the Isle of Man, which is even longer, even faster and even more deadly than this. But at 15.8 miles, nearly 27 kilometres, this is plenty long enough to make sure that our races on Saturday will be just 3 laps each.
Yeah, it's very, very demanding for the circuit. There's a lot of blind corners here, Martin, and a lot of rises where you just can't see where you're going. And therefore, the driver really needs to try and memorise this circuit, and that's easier said than done when it's 20-odd kilometres long. The drivers obviously try and learn as much as they can on simulation, and a lot of them have done a test day here, but it's still a very, very difficult task to remember that.
Well, there's 4 drivers in the World Touring Car field that are also in the 24-hour race that is happening this weekend. In fact, we're the support race for the 24 hours here at the Nürburgring, and a number of the drivers, Thiago Monteiro and Gabriele Tarquini among them, have done races here in the VLN, which is the long track championship that they have races here. To get into the 24-hour race, you have to have earned a 24-hour endurance license in VLN racing, which are up to 4-hour races on the Nordschleife. So you've got to have finished those successfully and safely before you're allowed, a certain number of them, before your license is upgraded to endurance status, and you're then allowed to start the 24-hour race. So Tom Coronel, Rob Huff are 2 of the 4 drivers. Nicky Katzberg in the Lada in this field will also be driving in the 24-hour race. And one coming the other way, a 24-hour race driver coming into the World Touring Car Championship, and that is Sabine Schmitz, the latest addition to the lineup of the Top Gear, the new format Top Gear program, which in fact starts on Sunday night in the UK, and as a result Sabine is, I think, not going to go out in this. Oh, hang on a minute, there is the car. In fact, you can see the black and white car. So Sabine Schmitz is going out in this practice session, but in fact they're shooting some live stuff here for Top Gear, so she won't do, no, she wasn't going to do one of the practice sessions. She's probably not going to do tomorrow morning's free practice session. But she has plenty of laps on the track. What she doesn't know is the car.
Yeah, she probably knows this circuit more than anybody else in the field. She's got a huge amount of experience around here. She's an absolute, what we'd call a ringer.
Yeah, she really is. Yeah, she's got more laps here than anybody else in the field. She's probably got more laps here than everybody else in the field put together by a fairly substantial margin. But guys like Tom Coronel's been racing here a long time, actually. Lots of endurance races here. Nicky Catsburg, Rob Huff, relatively recent converts. In fact, wasn't it when we were at Spa 2 or 3 years ago that Huffy had his first M24 here? He was racing with Rob Holland and was going between touring car sessions at Spa and Nürburgring 24 sessions here. And if you think, well, that's a long way away, they're basically the other side of the mountain range here. The Eifel Mountains sort of divide this part of Germany from Belgium, and so it's not that far away, which is why this track is a fairly similar nature to Spa, i.e. the weather comes at you in all sorts of shapes and sizes and not usually much of it good. Today's been warm and dry, it's quite muggy, but the forecast, much to the glee of Sabine Schmitz, is for lots of rain here. Now, she said last year that driving these touring cars around this track was probably one of the hardest things she'd ever had to do on the track in all of her time driving here, because they are so different from everything she's used to. She's used to lots of power, fair amount of downforce, but predominantly rear-wheel drive, and the front-wheel drive cars are a very, very different kettle of fish indeed.
Absolutely. These touring cars are quite skitty. They're very, very nimble and very, very precise. But on this very, very fast and bumpy circuit, they're a real handful. So the other thing was that with a touring car, because it drives from the front axle, it's very hard to maintain rear tyre temperatures. So on one of the fast corners, the car can be very oversteery and very difficult to control.
Coming out of the early section on the course, Hatzenbach through Kittelbacher and up to Flugplatz. And one of 3 very floaty sections. Despite its name, Flugplatz, the flying place, is not named for the cars, but because in the 1930s it was a popular gliding area. When the Germans weren't allowed to have powered flight in their air force, they trained all their pilots on gliders and then sneakily fitted them with engines later. Up through Schwedenkreuz to Arenberg. And one of the challenges, obviously, of this track is trying to learn where it goes after each of the blind brows. I mean, for the novice, that can be very disorientating. As Jackie Stewart said, I mean, look at this camera shot. You can see why it got its name, the Green Hell. It's basically a ribbon of tarmac, and in the 60s, a narrower ribbon of tarmac, surrounded by grass. In those days, no barriers, and trees right up to the edge of the grass. So it was just a green tunnel.
Absolutely. I mean, they've done a huge amount to make this circuit as safe as it can be, but it is probably the most dangerous circuit that the World Touring Car goes to. It's one of the most dangerous circuits in the world. Yeah. And the weather often not what everybody wants it to be here as well, which makes it a lot more difficult.
I think the fans don't mind too much. Cars just going from Arnberg through the foxhole and down through Adenauer Forest, and now starting the big long climb. Adenauer Forest, there's a little hotel just by the service road under the track, and it's there that Sabine Schmitz's parents live, and so she grew up not only within earshot but actually within walking distance of the track, toddling distance. Huge climb up to Breitscheid. So just down at Adenauer Forest is the lowest part of the track, and it's more than 300 metres elevation change up here to Breitscheid. And this is one of the really narrow, twisty sections. Just a little further back with Tom Coronel, who didn't complete a lap in the untimed session. Tyre or a wheel let go on the car, and he had to park it at Adenauer. He was never going to get up that hill with one-wheel drive.
These onboard shots are great at showing you the complexity of how unsighted you are at so many of these corners, and having to remember, is the next one left, is the next one right, is it that one, do I brake here?
And so often you're on a long 170, 180, 190, 200, 210, 220 km/h section into a 50, 60, 70 km/h corner, and you have to know, because you can't judge it on sight.
The other thing, which sounds very subtle, but normally on a racetrack, you're passing the same piece of tarmac every sort of 1 to 1.5 minutes.
Yeah.
And therefore, the circuit doesn't actually change that much till the next time you see it. Here, it can be raining one side of the circuit and not the other.
Yeah.
You can have had a driver who's gone off the circuit slightly and brought a load of gravel and dust on the circuit. There's so many things that you don't know if it's going to be different next time around, just because the lap is so long.
I'm trying to pick out from, oh, here we are down at Adenauer. So we're dropping down here. Oh, wait, no, that's not. Yes, it is. There's the hotel, so this is the run down into the lowest part of the circuit. So this is down at Adenauer, over the Adenauer Bridge, named after Konrad Adenauer, who was a former German chancellor in the 1930s, fact fans. And this is where the big climb starts, and if you don't have horsepower, this is one of the two places that really, really shows. If you think the Kemmel Straight at Spa demands grunt above all else, then that climb all the way up to Breitscheid demands even more.
Yeah, if you've got a car here that's not performing from an engine or aero perspective, there's nowhere to hide. So many of these long uphill drags and long fast sections of the circuit, you're going to get exposed very quickly if you've not got a car that's quick in a straight line.
And again, listen, he's almost sitting on the limiter in top gear here. Flying down towards Bergwerk, the scene of Niki Lauda's near fatal accident. It was the left-hand kink before the sharp right at Bergwerk, where the Austrian had his crash in 1976, so famously, or infamously perhaps. And then down through Kesselchen. As we get towards the latter part of the lap, you start then to get the smoke from the barbecues and the fires, as this is a more easily accessible area of the track, dropping into the carousel, perhaps one of the most famous corners of any and the most identifiable, with that big banked concrete oval. And now this is where it gets seriously up on its toes, the car, through Hoeracht. And then Hedwigshöhe, named after the Harry Potter character, of course. Wippermann is a fast right that leads you down into this section up to the rise at Brunchen. And Brunchen is one of the big jumps. You get 3 in a row here, and just you see Coronel coming up to Brunchen. Blind brow, very quick. You have to be utterly committed, because if you're wrong on the line going over the top there, you're all over the grass on the way down the hill, and therein lies a very quick trip to the barriers. And then climbing again, and the big jump, the very famous photographic jump at Flansgarten. We cut away there as we go out of helicopter range, and Lopez should be towards the end of the lap. He looks as though he's a little behind Coronel.
It's a great camera angle, that, just showing the speed of going through these fast sections and how high some of those curbs are as well, Martin.
Yes, and again, you know, it's dry now, but as you can see, there's a little bit of grass. I mean, in so many ways, runoff areas here will be familiar to British drivers of places like Brands Hatch or Oulton Park or Donington. Well, Donington's a little bit more modern Grand Prix circuit, but the old Parkland tracks, and this is an old Parkland track, have got no runoff area.
Yeah, there's absolutely no get-out-of-jail-free card. If you make a mistake, you're going to have some serious car damage at the very best case scenario, really.
Yeah. And there's no struggling back to the pits here. Unless you shunt it on the Grand Prix circuit, you've got no chance. Well, he was just dropping there into the carousel. This is the longest, fastest part of the circuit. They'll VMAX here just before they get to the left-hand kink, Antonius Bucher. This is the infamous Dottinger, and it's got to be one of the longest straights in motor racing. You just sit on the limiter and try and avoid getting onto Dottinger with somebody in your slipstream, because they will just come leapfrogging up a queue of cars.
Absolutely, this is the best part of the circuit. If you've got the strong engine, you wish it went on for another mile. And for drivers that are struggling with their engine and aero side of things, they wish that it would just end immediately, because they just feel that they're losing so much lap time through that section.
You could hear how much Coronel was just sitting there on the soft limit. Absolutely no more, not even one more rev to be had. And he comes then out through the final little wriggle, Tiergarten, and onto the front straight of the Grand Prix circuit. You can see the grid markings there. That's where the cars will start. Down past the big hotel and grandstands on the left-hand side, race control on your right, and they just flashed by underneath us. And it's Jose Maria Lopez who goes quickest. The European Touring Car Championship entries are all out on track at the same time. First time ever this weekend, Richard. ETC are A, here, and B, in the same field as the World Touring Car Championship. So we've got both of the championships running together, and so the slower cars will be started behind, so that hopefully the faster World Touring cars won't be catching Super 1600 Fiestas halfway round to the Nordschleife and tripping over them, because that could be a fairly disappointing meeting for everybody.
I think it's a great idea. The circuit's 5 times longer than our average circuit, so why not? Why not get it all out there at the same time?
Yeah, we start nearly 200 cars in the 24 hours. There is room. There is definitely room.
That's true.
There's room for the entire paddock to go out in their rental cars as well. It wouldn't be a good idea. I'm just saying there's enough track space. Marie-Pierre Rossi having a quick chat there with one of the Citroën guys, trying to convey some message. 8 minutes 44.2 was the flying lap from Lopez. Qualifying record set last year, 8 minutes 37, so 7 seconds off that, which sounds like a lifetime anywhere else. However, that's less than a second a minute, so doesn't have to find an awful lot there, does he?
No.
That's a tenth a corner.
Surprised to see how much the bonnet there on Katzberg's Lager is panting there under the aerodynamic pressure. Vibrating quite a lot.
Yeah. Down through Tiergarten, this left, right. And it's a little bit, again, like the end of the lap at Le Mans. You get sort of slightly faster chicane and then a slower chicane to bring you out onto the straight. Same there. And that must feel like when you come off a motorway and you've been sitting at high speed on the Autobahn for hours, and you come onto a normal pedestrian road or a normal country road, and suddenly you think that everything's in slow motion.
Yeah, that you can get out and walk almost.
Yes. Now, we're not using the full Mercedes arena either. We're using the shorter version, because the main loop of the Mercedes arena is in fact the World Touring Car and Audi TT Cup paddock this weekend, so that's behind you in the camera shot there. However, you are using, as you would normally see, the rest of the Grand Prix circuit, so dropping down towards the Dunlop hairpin at the bottom of the track. Nicky Katzberg looked like he was going fairly slowly there. Tom Coronel just out of Hatzenbach, and this is heading off towards Flugplatz.
It's literally like disappearing down a green plug hole, isn't it? It's just so unsighted.
Down 2 for Flugplatz, and in fact, no, he's already got. There's Flugplatz, I think. And again, you see, look. You're doing 170, 180, getting on for 200 Ks, and then you've got a 50 km/h left-right.
The other thing about these cars is everything's designed to be on and off the throttle all the time, like the normal circuits that we go to. So this race provides a different challenge for teams in terms of cooling, particularly with brakes and engine. The brakes get very cool when they're in a straight line for so long, having so much air through them, and then all of a sudden the driver demands so much retardation that the thing just heats up, and sometimes teams will crack discs around here just because the thermal shock is so severe.
Gabriele Tarquini pushing on hard at the moment. He's in the final sector. You just saw the jump at Brunchen, through Flansgarten and up to Schwalbenschwanz. I'd love to be able to translate some of these now. Most of them are fairly nondescript, I understand, from our German colleagues. The ones I can translate don't particularly relate to anything wildly exciting. Flansgarten, Plant Garden. Well, in fact, that's you just saw it was at Carousel, so that was Kesselchen. He was jumping there earlier on, and it gets its name. It wasn't a market garden, but the Dukes of Nuremberg, who inhabited the Schloss Nuremberg, which is the castle you can see that the track loops around. That was where all the serfs and peasants used to grow all the fruit and veg for their lordships.
There's a saying here about that very castle that if you can see it, it's about to rain, and if you can't see it, it is raining.
Yes.
And at the moment we can very much see it, but as you said earlier, Martin, it does sound like the weather will close in on us for tomorrow.
It certainly, yeah, it certainly suggested he's going to. So Gabriele Tarquini, green sector so far, but this is only his first flying lap. And again, you can see, even though the track is sort of 2 or 3 car widths wide, we've gone from the shortest and the narrowest track in Marrakesh to comfortably the longest, and here at the Nürburgring, and also a little bit wider even than the street circuit at Marrakesh. Tarquini 850.7. Where does that leave him? 5th fastest, Tom Coronel 4th, Mehdi Banani 3rd, Tom Chilton 2nd, and Jose Maria Lopez fastest. All the drivers have completed 1 lap. Coronel and Banani back in the pits. Nicky Katzberg locking up a little earlier down on the Grand Prix circuit. Rob Huff yet to complete a lap. Thiago Montero yet to complete a lap. Oh, Katzberg picked up a puncture. Is that why he locked up?
Looks that way. The other thing that you'll see probably a lot this weekend is that the drivers can quite often make mistakes on the Grand Prix loop, which is obviously the easiest part of the track. But the problem is all the cars are set up for the suspension settings and the handling settings for the Nordschleife. So actually, when the car's on the Grand Prix loop, it's very difficult to drive because the car's not set up for a conventional circuit, which is the first part of the lap.
It's like a rally car on forest suspension on a tarmac element.
Absolutely.
Because they need a lot more ground clearance. I mean, in terms of your road car, no ground clearance at all, but a lot more than a standard road car would need, because the springs will compress when they land off a lot of these bumps and jumps. And as you say, the curbs are notably really 1970s, aren't they? I mean, a modern Grand Prix track would have curbs like that ripped out in a heartbeat. Those are proper old-fashioned Grand Prix track style curbs, and they're there for a reason. They're there to try and make sure that drivers use the track rather than the bits around the outside of the track.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that in a strange way that does command that respect. The only problem is when you make a big mistake, it can really launch the car up in places.
Again, you can see in the forest, bearing in mind it's only Thursday, and a lot of these structures and camping areas that have been built up, they've been starting, well, beginning of the week probably. This is a massive, massive motorsporting event of the sort of size and scale that only maybe Le Mans and the Daytona 500, and not even the Daytona 500, it doesn't get that sort of huge camping element. I mean, really only Le Mans is of a similar magnitude to this.
Particularly in terms of the social element. Yeah, definitely.
It's quite insane just how much effort goes into this every year from all the people that come, all the fans that come. Back down Dottinger Her, the big buildings you could see at the beginning of that shot on the left-hand side run all the way down the main road up to the track, and those are all major motor and tyre manufacturers' facilities. Lots of them use the Nürburgring, the Nordschleife, particularly for suspension testing, because it allows you to do things at high speed that you can't do on public roads. And it is as bumpy and as kind to a car, I suppose you could say, as a public road is likely to be. So if you're Aston Martin or McLaren or anybody trying to test a road car that's going to be driven at V high speed, this is the place that you can put it through those sort of paces, and almost nowhere else compares.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody wants to laugh, have a look on the internet and you'll see lots of people making some very amateur mistakes, putting their expensive road cars through their paces around this place.
I think it's very, very easy to get carried away and imagine that you're a lot better than you are, or that you know where you are when really you don't. He's seeing slow-mo of Norby. It's fairly standard on the overrun, is it? Or has he actually got a fire underneath the car again? He has got a fire underneath the car. So that wasn't standard flames from the exhaust. He said he had a fire. He had a fire in Hungary underneath the car, didn't he? I wonder if that's a repetition.
These cars have flat floors underneath that are designed by the teams for aerodynamic purposes. But it means that if something does catch fire underneath the car, it's actually very difficult to get at, very difficult to extinguish.
And tends to keep the fire in close to the car, which is a little bit of a worry. So the Volvos currently, where are they lying? Fredrik Ekblom and Ted Björk. You're looking at Björk from above. He's 7th, Fredrik Ekblom 8th. And both of those guys have recently left the pits. So quite a few cars in the pits, having done just a single flying lap.
Is Ekblom just slowing down here? Has he also got a sick car?
That is not a happy sounding car, is it?
Does not sound good.
That sounds like it's either blown a turbo pipe or blown a turbo. So, but there's no clouds of smoke, so probably blown a turbo pipe. This is down to Adenauer Forest. So the bridge at Adenauer is, where are we? A third of the way round. So he's got another. Almost sounds like it's dropped a valve. That didn't sound like it was running on 4, did it? That's going to be a long, slow climb. In fact, that is Ekblom. It's going to be a very long, slow climb up the hill. I'm
surprised he actually doesn't just park the car, because if it's something as terminal as that, then they're not going to be able to fix it during this session. And why risk the rest of the engine if...
well, if it's dropped a valve, it's done anyway.
Yeah, exactly. But then often the engineers want to know what else has gone wrong before something else happens. But the other thing is, where he actually is on the circuit, he may actually not have radio contact with the team.
Yeah.
Because this circuit's just so big, with all the repeaters in the world, there's just no way through all this forest and elevation change that you'll be able to get full radio coverage. So quite often you just cannot speak to the driver at all.
Great audio from Rob Huff's car. You heard it as it popped out of the carousel there, wheels spinning furiously. And see how quickly these cars pick up speed up to Hoeracht. There's the transmitter tower, one of the safety radio towers through Hedvigshoek. And this is really quick here through Wipperman. Very, very fast section of the track. You've got to use a lot of curb here to get the line that you want. You hear the floor really hit the ground there, cresting the rise. And then straight on to Brunchen.
Last year, a lot of the teams went just 8 splitters.
Yeah.
The aerodynamic device at the bottom of the bumper, just so many compressions and rubbings that they had to constantly change splitters throughout the weekend.
And again, blind brows, lots of really vicious drops away. I mean, the elevated shot and the helicopter shots make it look relatively flat, but when you're trackside, this thing is a proper roller coaster. Little jump there at Flansgarten as well. There you go, more wheels off the deck, and the onboard audio will just hear them spinning up furiously. It makes it kind of hard to guide the car when it's in mid-air. So that makes takeoff and landing, like with an aeroplane, just so critical.
Absolutely. It's also where a lot of the reliability issues creep in, because it's stressing parts of the car that we just don't stress at the other races.
Yeah. Through the 2 lefts at Schwalbenschwanz, what's known as the mini carousel, and then through Dottingerhöhe. Long, long, long. Look at how long is that corner. That's turn 8 in Turkey long, and you have to have so much speed from the mini carousel all the way here, because otherwise you just get murdered. There's the castle on the extreme right of your shot on the hillside. You can see the tower of the castle. And we're just sitting here now, absolutely flat out, speed creeping up by half-kilometre-an-hour increments. And the engine singing its little heart out.
Oof.
And yeah, I know, that little wriggle as you go through Antonio's Bucca.
That's going to wake you up.
Really, yeah, really quick. Fastest part of the circuit in anything there. Even in a road car, that's 170-mile-an-hour section. That's just frighteningly quick. Black and orange flag for Huff. Is he dripping something? And there's Peter Huff. He's ready for the weather. Several layers on. Just saying this morning or this afternoon, actually, if you didn't go shorts today, you've blown it.
That's staying in your suitcase.
Yeah, the window of opportunity was there. Now then, there you go. Chaga Montero, as we ride on board, just going by one of the Super 1600 European Touring Car Fiestas. And, you know, here's another element, into the evening sun. So, has the guy behind seen you? Do you see the guy in front? Or are you just cresting a rise in a glare and then suddenly there's somebody there going 50, 60, 70 kilometres an hour slower than you are?
And as everyone will know from being sat in a road car, when you're actually going through bright sunlight through trees, that dappling effect can sometimes just bleach the back of your retina and you can't see a thing.
Absolutely right.
And that's not what you need around this place.
Well, so far, Jose Maria Lopez, as you can see on the left, fastest of all. That was on his first flying lap. He's just gone and done half a lap. Is that smoke from the barbecues already across the track? Or is somebody blown up? That looks like somebody's had a fairly large lunch. Now, nothing came past us trailing smoke, so it is either blowing across the track from the end of the Grand Prix circuit, but that's not the prevailing wind. It's coming from the metre-long Bratwurst stand. That's where it's coming from, just outside the circuit. That's right where that is. So they'll be firing up all the Bratwurst stands ready for the crowds this evening. It will be party central on the campsites and all the way around this track. It's very difficult when you're driving on this track not to get distracted and look around you, which seems like a sort of slightly silly thing to say.
It's just so hard to know where to focus your eyes, and a lot of drivers talk about that. They're so used to normally looking down the track, whereas here that's just impossible.
Yeah. If you can't see through the corner, it's very hard to drive through the corner if you don't have intimate knowledge of the circuit, and there's not many corners here you can see through. Even here, look, you're looking hard left, judging this double left-hander, but you wouldn't know how tight the second element of it is as you come out of the first element unless you knew. Rob Huff back in the pits, so he came past us to complete the lap, went up the Grand Prix circuit and then cut back in the back of the pit lane, which is a common wheeze here, to save you having to do a 15.5-mile in-lap. And we'll see that a lot in qualifying as well, cars going out and then coming straight back in on the end of the Grand Prix lap, so it's only 2.5 miles in and out of the pits as opposed to 15.5. Down towards Adenauer. Katzberg up by 0.6 of a second. You want to be up by 6 seconds, really. It's amazing on such a long track that you can get such tiny gaps between the cars. First to second, Lopez to Huff, 3.2 seconds. Chilton is a further 2 seconds back.
That Lada, we've said it before, Martin, but never looks that easy to drive. Sometimes very fast, but you can always see that all three of the drivers have to really hustle that car no matter where we go. So this circuit can't be inspiring confidence in them at all.
Spoke to Nicky Katzberg after the drivers' briefing, which was after the test session at lunchtime, and he said you have more moments in a World Touring car in 5 laps than you have in a GT3 car in a 24-hour race. He said, excluding traffic, he said it is such a hustle These cars are so hard work to wring the speed out of them anywhere, and here more than anywhere. It's quite a compliment to the car that these guys actually do manage to get them round and make it look so relatively easy.
And Valente, who we're watching on our screens now, he had an incredible qualifying session last year. I think he put on the front row of the grid.
Yep.
And probably one of the standout performances of the season, really, in a rather unfancied car. He did an incredible job.
And then unfortunately didn't make it onto the Grand Prix loop when he started from the front row.
No,
didn't make it onto the Nordschleife. Yeah,
often was the case with
yes.
Hugo last year, but I think he is starting to mature. Just needs to keep out of his teammates' way.
Yes. Now, down towards the bottom of your timing pylon, you'll see Ferenc Fischer, 16th fastest, but you will see that Norbert Michelitz has not recorded a full lap time, and that is because we saw his car alight earlier on in the session, so he has not been able to get back to the pits, or if he has, it'll be on a flatbed, and he hasn't been able to go back out yet, so Norby yet to set a time, and valuable track session time lost. However, if it is wet and miserable and cold tomorrow as forecast, might actually not make an iota of difference. He knows the track relatively well. See Lada bouncing and jumping all over the place. Is it, again, the section Wippermann, Brunchen, Flansgarten. It's that really switchback. I mean, it's like going over a series of humpback bridges almost.
These helicam shots are fantastic, aren't they?
And again, look on the left-hand side, all the parking, all the camping. Think, well, you know, what are all those great big marquees? People have just brought them. They're not official. And on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, everywhere, smoke from barbecues. And the drivers, you know, talk about that, especially last year when it was new to so many of them, saying, you're just driving along and suddenly you can smell, you know, what's cooking and, you know, wood smoke in the trees. I was passing motorhomes and vans and stuff with trailers loaded with split logs and everything for the weekend, and it's a remarkable logistics performance, not just for the racing but for the spectators as well. They provide an awful lot of their own sustenance.
And I think there's a fair amount of beer that gets consumed here as well.
I believe they do like a beer. I have that on reasonably good authority, yes. I'm not quite sure what state they're in on Monday, but they do like a beer or two. Nicky Katzberg with his first lap went 11th quickest. As you can see, he's considerably quicker than that now, 1.6 seconds quicker. Where was he? He was 12 seconds off the pace on Jose Maria Lopez on his first flying lap. So it's not really going to get him an awful lot closer, is it? He goes to second fastest, 2.4 seconds. And that would appear to be...
Valente.
Is that Hugo? Yeah.
Commentator's curse, I'm afraid.
Yeah, you just said how well he was going, so...
That's right in the middle of the circuit there as well.
Yeah.
It's not a good place for that car to wind up. I think Hugo's nervous that someone's about to slam in the side of him.
Yes. And...
In fact, it looked like the car was recovering there because he perhaps ran in sympathy.
Oh! So that is a right front wheel or tyre failure, because he just went straight on.
Yeah, that's not Hugo.
That's not...
Yeah, not
Non,
driving.
j'ai craché fort.
he said he had a puncture, Jay Crivet. Code 60 flags are being shown, and backing up away from that, prior to the Code 60, we might see double waved yellows, which means maximum speed of 120 kilometers an hour. So, okay, our session is due to run until 19:45 local, 25 minutes from now. This is really, I mean, bad news for Hugo, but it's very good news for the organisers. Plenty of practice. I know their marshals will get plenty more throughout the 24-hour race, particularly if the weather is a little grim. But I think the car that we saw from above was actually just one of the Super 1600 cars. I think it was one of the Fiestas that had come upon the scene of the incident. So Hugo picked up a puncture, and we've seen a couple of cars already with punctures. Unfortunately for Hugo, he found out when he tried to turn left at top speed and the car was not for turning.
No, he's on a very good lap until that point as well, actually.
Look at this from Coronel, sustained high speed there. And again, the commitment, the knowledge that you need to make that commitment, second to none here. And that was out of the final couple of corners at Tiergarten. Jose Maria Lopez comes across the line, another purple lap, and an 8 minutes 44.236. Now, he was purple in sectors 1, 2 and 3. Sector 4 and sector 5 he wasn't. So sector 4 is after... that's from Dottinghur. Sector 3 to 4 is Bergwerk, Kesselchen, all the way around through Wipperman, Brunchen. And that is on the run up to Brunchen. So we're looking back from Brunchen, I think, down towards Hugo being towed up the hill. As you can see, it's making a bit of a mess of the very soft black earth here. And because he's got both right-hand wheels ripped off.
Putain, mais ils sont en train de défoncer la caisse, ils sont en train de la tirer.
Translate that at your own discretion. I shan't be. He wasn't wildly impressed. Unfortunately, the Jeep seems to have run into a little bit of a traction problem, but then it is trying to drag a car which is basically digging itself into the ground.
Very difficult to recover cars around here just because it's so long. You can't have all the normal cranes.
And you sort of almost want to be towing it on the track, except you don't want to be towing it on the track. It would be easier to get it to drag along on the tarmac than it, because it's digging itself in there in the mud. So this is the left at Wipperman. That's quick. That's properly quick.
Yeah, he's quite lucky actually. He's fairly glancing, but just no chance to be able to turn the car with no air pressure inside that right front tyre.
No, and no braking either. So it's clattered both corners. Hopefully no engine damage, no transmission damage, but when they get the car back tonight, it's going to be a long night for the boys at Lada, because free practice 2 on track at 8:15 tomorrow morning. So it's 06:15 Greenwich Mean Time. Translate that into your local language. So the Lada boys will have a lot of work to do. Meanwhile, at Norby's car, which has returned, and again, I'm assuming the deal here with the 24-hour race is they're set up to try and make sure that anybody that can make it to the finish makes it to the finish. So they have flatbeds. So for instance, Hugo's car, they'll tow it up there to Brunchen, out of the track onto the public road on a flatbed, drive it down the public road, back into the paddock, deliver it back to the Parc Fermé right behind the race control, and then you can try and get the car in. But as you can see, it's basically a ploughing contest, and the plough won over the tractor.
Yeah, there'll be lots of sharp edges and broken bits digging in under that car.
Well, and the floor as well, because the wheel arches will come round and act like a scoop. At the back of the wheel arch will be digging into the ground, digging into the mud.
Yeah, I think they're probably just going to try and resume normal order with perhaps just a yellow out that one corner. It's a relatively safe position there.
Well, what it means is that Jose Maria Lopez will likely end the session as the fastest man, because with yellow flags there, is that still code 60? Couldn't quite see. Did slightly green there, did slightly look to me as though there might still have been a code 60 flag there, I'm not sure. didn't look like Nicky, didn't sound like Nicky Katzberg was down to 60k, so it may just have been a single yellow, stationary yellow there to guard the situation.
Katzberg looks very committed, actually. Out of all the drivers we've probably seen in this session, he's definitely one of the ones that's using more of the tarmac and just taking a bit more curb and just dropping white lines here and there. He does seem to be pushing quite hard for a free practice session. Must be feeling quite confident.
Well, he's had the test session here. He's also been out in his GT3 car in the 24-hour test session. There'll be a few more of those before the weekend is over. You could do a lot worse than to climb up over the fence and go and chat to some of the fans. They'll be very pleased to see you and to cheer you up, and they will obviously try and feed you beer and bratwurst and everything else they're cooking. And the level of attention that goes into some of their constructions is astonishing. Pre-cut timber buildings are brought, you know, that they've made themselves. I was in the forest last year watching some guys setting up, and one guy's job was to whitewash the picket fence that they had set up around their camping area. So he had a beer and a bucket of white paint, and he was painting the picket fence white. I don't even do that at my house.
No, absolutely. It is amazing, the commitment from the fans here. I mean, there's the so many people here from so many parts of Germany and further afield.
Yes, we always say this when we go to Le Mans. If you've never been and you think, oh, I wonder if it's as good as, it's better. I could spend the entire broadcast telling you how much better it is than you think it's ever going to be and still not scrape the surface. And this place is the same. If you fancy a motor racing trip, this absolutely has to be on your to-do list. I don't like the word bucket list, but it is a thing that you have to do if you want to call yourself a motor racing fan. You must go and watch MotoGP. You must go to Monza. You must go to Monaco. You must go to Le Mans. You must come here. This place. And, you know, DCM race, yeah, and the VLN race, okay. This is the big one. This is what it's all about. It's the most remarkable circus that you'll see anywhere.
So punishing, isn't it?
Really is twitchy there, isn't it? You see the car just sort of jinking from wheel to wheel as the track ripples underneath it. Real washboard there. Again, that's that Wipperman, Brunchen, Flansgarten section. It's so fast and so demanding.
Some of these drivers are literally just dancing with their cars through this section.
Just it's that classic front-wheel drive thing, isn't it? Just keep the foot buried and hope the car doesn't throw itself from one crest to the wrong crest. That's the mini carousel there at Schwabenschwanz. I'm pretty certain I can't actually translate that into English. I sort of think I know what it means. It's not polite.
I was about to ask you to share it.
Yeah, no. That might be one for off air. It's certainly in my bad German. It's possibly not the best thing to be mentioning. A few of the Super 1600 cars we saw slipstream each other. Saw a couple of Fiestas slipstreaming each other down the straight here. If you think it's interminable when you're sitting on board in a 1.6 turbo World Touring car, imagine what it's in a 1.6 normally aspirated Fiesta. Be able to get the newspaper out and read a broadsheet as you go down, dotting a heart.
And this section, as you say, Martin, for slipstreaming, where Montero is, or just coming out of now, race day, you'll see a lot of overtaking there, a lot of slipstreaming. It'll be a real area where the drivers can actually get past a car ahead of them. We
saw the Citroens last year just picking cars off. It was like, if you're old enough to remember 50cc or 80cc motorcycle Grand Prix, or even 125s, the small capacity motorcycles, if you got onto a queue, you just leapfrogged all the way along the queue, getting a tow off each vehicle. We saw Lopez and Muller doing that last year, passing 3 or 4 cars at a time, just leapfrogging their way, getting a parallel tow, not even having to tuck in behind, but just into the wash of the car in front and keeping that momentum going.
Absolutely, and when you're maxed out like that, makes a big difference.
This is a strange onboard view. It almost looks like the track plateaus here and then rises again. It's climbing the whole way. It's just climbing more severely and then less severely out from Adenau all the way up here to Breitscheid. And then, of course, what goes up, you then start this enormously fast, just piling on the speed down here. Insanely quick, you know, they're up to 150, 160. This is, again, almost absolutely flat on the limiter, 170 miles an hour in these cars before they have to get on the brakes heading up towards, or down towards Bergwerk. So this is a right at Bergwerk, which is mine workings. Basically, a Bergwerk is a mine, mountain workings. And then dropping into the carousel, named after Rudolf Caracciola. He was the first winner of a German Grand Prix on the Nürburgring back in 1927.
Have to be so patient through that corner. It's very tempting the drivers to bury their foot in the throttle, but
yeah,
you just can't stabilise the car until you get towards the exit.
Well, there's definitely a school of thought that believes that sitting on the tarmac around the outside is at least as fast as dropping into the really bumpy concrete bit. And even in a road car, the concrete bit is very bumpy. There's one of the Super 1600 Fiestas in front of us. That's Kessia Nix. And catching her just as they get to the yellow flag section where Ugo had gone off.
It'd be very easy for him to be hot-headed and forget about that yellow flag there. Yeah. And yeah, did well to remember that.
Frustration, I mean, you know, you've got 27, 28, 26 kilometres of track and you catch a slow car in the 200 metres that is guarded by a yellow flag. That is just sod's law, isn't it?
Absolutely.
However, better to take your punishment there than to take it in the steward's room later.
Chilton's been fairly racy this session.
Yep. Looks fairly comfortable with the Citroen. So too Mehdi Banani. Tom is 5th and Mehdi is 6th on the timing tower. Chilton 5.2 away from the fastest lap, Mehdi 5.3. In fact, there's only 0.03 of a second between them, isn't there? 5.277 off and 5.307 off. So, I mean, that's insane. Two different drivers with very different styles in a near identical car on the same track within, as you can see, sight of each other. That was Mehdi just going out of shot, and there's Tom coming in. So he'll see him along Dottinger-Her. And they're 0.03 of a second apart on an 8-minute 50 lap. It's insanely close. Top three are covered by just over 2.5 seconds. Jose Maria Lopez 2.41 ahead of Nicky Katzberg, Rob Huff 2.75 back, then Thiago Monteiro 4.8 back, 5.27 back is Chilton, 5.30 back is Banani. That might change on this lap. Chilton's on a better lap. As you can see in the last sector, 1.3 up on his previous best. So that'll get him within shooting distance of the top 3 or 4, top 3. And Banani, well, not a better lap. Chilton goes second with an 8:45.6. So that was a very much better lap.
Looking very, very comfortable in that Citroen this weekend so far.
Well, bearing in mind, he hasn't had a lot of time on the track. He's not doing the 24-hour race. Not sure if he's done any VLN races this season. That's very good. Nicky Katzberg 3rd. Coming across the line, you saw the Volvo. And I've lost him. Ted Bjork is 11th. Fredrik Ekblom's car shown us in the pit lane, by the way, so we will find out later exactly what grubby bits stopped making the right noises and started making clanking noises. Sabine Schmitz comes down pit road as well. She is 13th, 13.03 off the pace.
Van Muller's having a very quiet session at the moment.
Yes. Not too many places of Van Muller is going to be 6.7 seconds slower than anyone, never mind his own teammate in the same car. One of the things that is different, a generational difference, particularly perhaps between Ivan and Jose Maria Lopez, is that Pichito can spend a day on the simulator and really put it into practice, whereas Ivan can spend a day on the simulator and it not having the same effect on his speed when he gets onto the racetrack.
Yeah, I think Ivan suffered with motion sickness on some other simulators as well. He's definitely identified it as something that Pichito has an edge over him, and like you say, it's a generational thing. I mean, there weren't even touring car computer games when Ivan started racing touring cars. So.
Yeah, the famous Toka series. Was he in those? I suppose he probably was, wasn't he? Probably him and John Bincliffe in Audis and stuff like that, right in the beginning. Right. Yeah. I'm not sure if it was. I think Ivan had. I think he'd finished with the two-wheel drive Audi before. I think the original Toka. Who was the other? Oh, it was Bieler and Bincliffe, wasn't it? Because that would have been in that Super Touring era, and Ivan at that stage was then racing in the Deutsche Super Tourenwagen, I would imagine, for Audi, or possibly French Super Tourism. That would have been after the four-wheel. Oh no, hang on, Bincliffe had a four-wheel drive. Or was that?
I'm pretty sure Muller was definitely in an Audi.
Oh no, he may well have been. He may well have been. To say I wasn't a huge aficionado, or I didn't have a PlayStation. Let's put it that way. So I very rarely got to play it. We just saw practice start from Lopez and considerable bimbling going on here. So he'll be heading back into the pit lane, because you're never going to get a quick lap round the Nordschleife starting like this on the Grand Prix circuit. Past him goes Grégoire de Moustier,
who is quite a long way off, actually.
Yeah. Well, not a surprise, really. I don't think that he's done any laps on the track, or almost any laps on the track at all since last year.
Apparently, he did do a test day 2 weeks ago.
Oh, right. He came and did that, did he? Okay.
Whether that was in his car, oh no, it wasn't in his car. Apparently, it was in another racing car just to learn the circuit. But
right.
It wasn't in a World Touring car. But he has had some recent experience, so he'll be disappointed to be that far off the pace.
Well, it is a massive, massive track. He's not empirically an awful long way off, even though he is 26 seconds off. But that's not in a 2.5 minute lap. That's in a 9 minute lap. On board again with Coronel. Now, despite having that wheel failure, tyre failure, whichever it was, on the very first lap of the test session at lunchtime, Coronel still looking very committed. Knows the track well, likes racing at this place. Tom loves a challenge. He likes something that's different and exciting, and boy, this is all of those.
And again, very, very close to the Dutch border to get a lot of fans over here for Coronel as well. So always been a big race for the Dutch.
And again into the Wipperman, Brunchen, Flansgarten section. And the car really tippy-toey here. So there's definitely no code 60, just a single yellow flag, stationary yellow guarding Ugo's car. And even there, where it sounds like the car's sort of not quite at full speed, you can see how much gradient change there is. More smoke from the barbecues. Corners constantly dropping away under you on the exit, and adverse cambers everywhere. I mean, look at there. As you drop down there, then you start to go into that left. The car's trying to drag itself off into the forest to your right.
Oof.
Yep.
Such a big drop.
Little leap at Flansgarten. And then down towards the mini carousel. You can see now that we're starting to lose the light a little. It's clouded over a bit since earlier on this afternoon. The sun has now dropped behind the yard arm, so beer drinking may commence. Out down towards the last right before dotting a her. And then his never-ending run back to the pits. And Norby back out on track, so whatever ailed the car, whatever it caught light underneath, obviously wasn't either terminal or fast spread. That was a grey car rather than a green car, wasn't it? I think that was,
yeah, especially it's so much better for a driver to get back out in the same session, just to get their eye back in, the confidence back. It's just a different mentality if you do get the car back out, even if it's just for one lap. Makes a huge difference to the mentality of the driver.
You see the public road runs right alongside the racetrack here. As you're driving along the road, you can actually see the roof of the cars whistling by through the trees. Through the final chicane across the bridge, the access road underneath into the centre of the circuit, and comes across the line. Another committed lap from Coronel, stays 8th, 6.29 off. Ivan Muller's gone 2nd, by the way. Ooh, and Rob Huff's in the barriers.
Whether that's a rear or front-facing camera, it's not good.
Making it. Oh, okay. I'm guessing now. Again, we're Wipperman Brunchen territory. Same deal, right front puncture. And again.
Oh, big shot, boys, big shot. Front right suspension collapsed. Ah!
It's a much bigger hit than Valente. Much bigger hit. So
you see the car nearly rolled. Okay.
Probably much more sort of structural damage in an accident like that than the glancing blow that Valente had. But Rob says it's a suspension failure, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if it was a puncture.
Yeah.
Quite often the drivers can't really feel the difference in a moment like that. So we'll wait and see. But it could well be sort of chassis legs or all kinds of structural damage there to Rob's car. He didn't get away anywhere near as lightly as Ugo Valente.
Great view of this huge circuit. Not just the red flags are out. Rob was certainly sounded like he was in a bit of pain there. You saw the door of the car was open. I think he's out. But,
pain or frustration? I think I'd probably wager slightly on frustration. I hope it's only frustration as well.
So. A hit like that, although it was on the passenger side of the left-hand drive Honda, certainly might want to knock the wind out of his sails. So cars will head back into the pit road. Let's say great view of from the helicopter of the track that encircles 3 villages, as well as is bordered by half a dozen villages that spring up for the race.
See the car's shaking its head before it even sees the corner.
Yeah. And you can see already gravel and rubber and so on in the track. We've had several track sessions already today. Cars were on track at 8 this morning. So
big hit, big hit.
Yeah. Unfortunately, again, second free practice for World Touring cars, which might be a really critical one if it's raining tomorrow, will be at 8 in the morning. So again, we're looking at a long night for the Asport team, I'm afraid. And the session is over anyway, with less than a minute to go. So we will see no further cars on track. And the race director had very little option there, I think, than to throw the red. I think it's neither here nor there. Anybody who was halfway around would have completed their lap, but it's testing rather than anything else. So Lopez and Muller, the 2 factory Citroens, 1st and 2nd. Tom Chilton, 3rd fastest, ahead of Nicky Katzberg. Rob Huff, 5th quickest before his shunt. There is Rob with the helmet off, talking to the medical crew. One of 16 Audis used here as intervention cars, being supplied free of charge to the race by Audi. And the DMSB, guys that run the races here with a huge variety of snatch vehicles and so on. Well, let's hear what Sport here. Alex is with Alessandro Mariani.
Alessandro, that was a nasty looking crash there. Have you got any idea what happened?
I listen his comment by the radio. He said that the problem of the front wheel, probably a puncture, and he shunt on the right. And he said that he's okay, and but he was really upset.
Looked like quite a hit. Does look like he's out the car though, by the looks of the screen.
Yeah. He said I'm fine, and I jump out of the car. So he immediately in the radio told us what is going.
Well, Alessandro heard what we heard, obviously, on the team radio. And Alex down in the pit lane, I don't think hearing all of that conversation. However, if Rob hasn't got a stiff neck now, he probably will do in an hour or so. So he's being checked out. Thiago Monteiro has parked alongside him.
Parked Ferme, I think.
Yeah, maybe. In fact, that's one of the ETC cars you can see behind. Rob checking for damage. It's a little bit of pre-recorded footage, but he's being taken away for examination by the medical team. It would be hazarding a guess at where that is. See, the TV director is thinking exactly the same. If we pull back, we can see it is... again, I'm thinking still, it's in sector 4, I'm still thinking, yeah, somewhere around Haart, Wipperman, that section. Maybe a little earlier, maybe Kesselsen, Klostertal. Anyway, free practice finishes under red flag with Jose Maria Lopez, Ivan Muller fastest for Citroën, and Tom Chilton making it a C-Elysée top 3. Nicky Katzberg, the best of the Ladas, Rob Huff, the best of the Hondas, 4th and 5th. Problems for Fredrik Ekblom's engine. Ter Björk just ahead of him, but only just. Sabine Schmitz struggling to find her feet in the cruise, and top gear distractions are not going to help much. John Philippi, Franz Fischer, and Grégoire de Moustier completing their laps, but we saw Norbert Michelis trying to get a lap in. Unfortunately, that was red flagged away from him. There is Schloss Nürburg. Again, that should be on your tourist trail. Greatly restored. And Tom Chilton, 3rd fastest. He is the top WTCC trophy driver. And making it a Citroën 1, 2, 3. Ivan Muller in 2nd place.